you.
Right, good evening. You're watching Live with Faye. Thank you for joining us on YouTube. You know, every evening at 8 o'clock on YouTube, we bring you a discussion about the state of affairs in our country. Today is Women Equality Day. And there couldn't have been a more harsh sort of reminder how far away we are from equality than the stories that we're going to bring you today. Now, I'm aware of the fact that the rest of the media is still talking about the Sushant Singh Rajput case, and good for them. But there are several other things going on in our country that require the same, if not more, urgent attention than that one case. Today's stories, unfortunately, will be disturbing. So I just want to warn our viewers that you might find some of the information here distressing. If you are someone who finds crime and violence distressing, then this might not be best advised for you. But for the rest, this is something that we have to pay attention to. The state of Uttar Pradesh, and we've had several conversations about the jungle raj, or the lack of law and order in Uttar Pradesh, and the gangsters who are running wild and doing whatever they please, but the police were taking law into their own hands. The one thing that we have not discussed enough is caste-based violence and brutality that seems to have taken on a life of its own through the lockdown and has become much, much worse. Along with that caste-based brutality, there's at the intersection also brutality towards women, and women from the Dalit community have been made targets. Now, there have been 4 incidents in the last 10 days, and 3 of those incidents have involved Dalit women. Just to take you through the one that we're looking at right now, a 17-year-old girl was found dead near her house in Lakhimpur Kheri. The girl was a minor. She had been raped and killed. Her throat had been slit with a sharp weapon. On the 15th of August, on Independence Day, a 17-year-old Dalit girl was gang raped and burnt with cigarettes in Gorakhpur, the hometown of the chief minister. 2 have been arrested. Also on the 15th of August, a 21-year-old mentally and physically disabled Dalit woman was raped by a local resident. On the 14th of August, a 13-year-old Dalit child was raped and killed. Reports suggest her eyes had been gouged out and her tongue had been cut off. This sort of brutality suggests that these crimes were far more than acts of just rape. Were these crimes meant to send a lesson to the entire community, or send a message, I beg your pardon, to the entire community? Is this happening because of a lack of law and order? Are the police looking away when it comes to crimes that involve Dalit victims? Has the lockdown given more room for these crimes to take place? These are unfortunately conversations that we're going to have on Women Equality Day. And I can't begin to tell you how much it distresses me to bring you these stories, but this is the reality, and part of the job is to bring you the reality. Let me bring my panelists in. Mr. Sharat Pradhan is the senior journalist who understands Uttar Pradesh better than any other journalist I have met. Mr. Banerjee is the former DGP of Uttar Pradesh. Mr. John Dayal, Dr. John Dayal is a Dalit rights activist and academic, he's a scholar on the matter. And Trisha Shetty is a lawyer who specifically deals with issues regarding crimes of a sexual nature and helps out those victims who need the help of lawyers. I welcome all of you to this conversation. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Pradhan, I will start with you. And I know that you've been tracking this closely in Lucknow, where you are. In your opinion, and this was the big, so when I put this up on Twitter as well, a lot of people wrote back, of course they did, saying, oh, you are that kind of journalist who picks out the caste of the victim where it is not relevant. So I want to understand from you, is the caste of the victim relevant in these cases?
Well, certainly it is. You know, I find what you rightly said. I was discussing these cases with some journalists here, and they were trying to impress upon me that, well, it is not the caste angle, it is a sex crime. Point is that since the Dalits are the most continue to be the downtrodden, neglected, and more often than not, the harassed lot continue to be. So it is very obvious that they certainly become more vulnerable than anybody else. So it is, and the culprits, often know, and they know how easier it is for them to get away when the crime is committed against a Dalit. So they become, because they are weak, they are unprotected, and invariably they get very little protection from the so-called guardians of law. So that is the reason they become easy prey and easy target for people, for these, what should I call them, these rogues who find it convenient to repeatedly commit such crimes or heinous crimes on these women. And, it is also because I also blame the overall atmosphere that has been created. And far from providing any kind of protection about which Yogi Adityanath, the UP Chief Minister, has been from day one, hammer and tongs, that he is here to, change the shape of UP, the UP's law and order, and that he would, it was on the promise of providing protection to women that he rode on to power. But as you have seen, and you see, in the last 10 days, this is the third incident. So where is the protection for women? And the problem is that I feel is that the Chief Minister chooses to remain in a denial mode, and his entire machinery gets on to proving what is not the reality. They are, if there is a rape, they will try to establish something else. If there is a dowry death, they will try to convince that no, it is a suicide, and which is
Mr. Pradhan, forgive me for interrupting you.
Just one thing.
Hasn't this always been the case in Uttar Pradesh? Is there any reason for you to say things have gotten worse now?
Well, one expected some improvement with the Yogi Adityanath coming in, because one felt that he was initially, that is the impression that was given, that here is a man who believes in business and who would not get carried away by so many other factors as successive chief ministers have been. But it's been very disappointing. As far as law and order is concerned, it's the same story. So I agree with you that a lot of previous chief ministers too have been trying to do this. Every chief minister claims that he has reduced the crime in the state. And if they were all to be believed, then we would be living in some kind of some real Ram Rajya or whatever. But the fact of the matter is that such is not the case. So it is fudging of statistics. And in order to prove that what they believe is right, and that is what the lies which is they try to spread around, it doesn't go with the reality.
Yes, in fact, I just want to bring in the retired DGP as well, Mr. Banerjee, who understands UP very well. Mr. Banerjee, if you look at the reports that are coming out of Uttar Pradesh right now, do you have reason to believe that violence against women, and specifically caste-based violence against women, has gone up, or is it the same as, from what you remember?
Frankly, the violence against women, and that based on caste, is the same as before. It just keeps rising proportionately as the population increases. Take the case of Lakhimpur. I talked to the Superintendent of Police Lakhimpur in detail about the two cases which happened in Lakhimpur, because it's in the focus. Now, in the first case, the girl is about 13 years old. Her rapists have been caught hold of. In fact, there is one rapist and one accomplice. The girl is a scheduled caste girl. The rapist is also a scheduled caste boy. The helper, or rather the person who was along with him, is a non-scheduled caste person. And both are first-time criminals. So this is not something which could have been prevented inter se by the police. However, if there was something like continuous punishment, certainty of punishment in these cases, and at a very early stage, then this could have been prevented. Secondly, the incident which took place on Monday, again, the police is on the outlook. And they are trying to do whatever is possible. Probably they said, he told me, that they'll be arresting the person very soon. Now, one more thing I'd like to bring in here. The Superintendent of Police himself I asked him. He said, yes, he was a scheduled caste officer. Now, with this kind of a thing, and the case being investigated by a deputy SP, a gazetted officer is invariably going to investigate a case of SC/ST crimes. I do not think that there is an opportunity for the actual accused to run away. They'll be taken care of. However, the point is that, is there a certainty of punishment? Is it swift enough? Do you have special courts to try these cases? If there are not, if you don't have these special cases, special courts, if you don't have a time-bound program for trial, these things are going to continue, because until and unless there is continuous punishment, it will, this continuous punishment is going to act as a deterrent for anybody else trying to commit such crimes. About crime against women during lockdown, yes, domestic crime has gone up, domestic violence crime did go up, but the actual crime figure fell because of lockdown. Post-lockdown, at least I personally expected this kind of a thing to happen. There is going to be, because of economic problems and other things, there is going to be a spurt in crime, but not this type of a crime which we are seeing right now.
All right, Mr. Banerjee, I'll come back to you, but I just want to take another question to John Dayal. Dr. Dayal, thank you for joining us. I'm just going to share a story onto the screen so our viewers can see it as well. Now, this is a report from the 17th of February this year, and I'm reading it out of the Wire, although it was covered by most national media, national newspapers at least. A village near Kanpur in Uttar Pradesh was attacked by a mob of upper-class people, and several Dalits in that village were injured quite severely. And it was done to sort of teach them a lesson. Even the elderly and the women in that village were beaten up. Are you seeing this as a specific problem on the rise? Would you agree with Mr. Banerjee that this was always the case? And like Mr. Pradhan said, we expected things to get better, but they haven't.
No, I entirely agree with Mr. Pradhan, not because he is like me, a journalist, slightly younger, but both of us between ourselves, I think, have 90 years of experience. But my person's take on the former DGP of Uttar Pradesh, that is the whole issue, sir. Comparative. It is, COVID is there, domestic crime is increasing. But the point really is, are you on the, do you agree with me that Dalits specifically continue to be targeted because they're Dalits? Not necessarily raped always, after all, men aren't, not necessarily beaten up, but oppression as Dalits is a reality in India. It's in the soil. And when it translates into crime and the reportage of crime and the police containment of crime and the courts handling it, it gets multiplied. You said something very sensitive, and I wonder why you said that. You said, I checked up, and the SP is a scheduled caste officer himself. I have never bothered to check up what is the caste, because it doesn't really matter. He's a policeman trying to do his job. How did it happen or matter that he's a Dalit? Because does that mitigate? Will it mean that the SHO, will it mean that the ASI, the IO, are all Dalits and still a Dalit is Dalit? It's not so. The fear of police, the law, fear of the law, doesn't exist in the state of impunity that surrounds the whole situation of Dalits. That is the point. And therefore, when they attack a village, when they so brutalize them, when they burn them with cigarettes, when women are attacked, what are they trying to say? It is not a social crime as something that would happen between neighbors. There is something deeper, like caste itself, and the reasons and the rationale is there.
Mr. Banerjee, do you want to respond to that before I bring in Ms. Shetty?
There's only one small thing I'd like to say. I brought in the caste of the superintendent of police because invariably when a discussion takes place, it is said that a person who does not belong to a scheduled caste does not have the kind of sensibility towards the crime committed against them. It's only for that matter I said, for there is for no other reason. Any other SP worth his salt would do what Satinder is doing in Lakhimpur.
Okay. I'll bring in Trisha Shetty. I also want to point out to our audience, if we normally complain about why television media is the way it is, it's because while we were discussing the Congress party 2 days ago, we had nearly 1,000 viewers. Today, we're discussing Dalit atrocities and we have 120 viewers. The audience also needs to hold itself accountable for what you lend your eyeballs and your ears to, and what you lend your attention to, really, which is what the media is following as a cue. As far as I'm concerned, I don't care if there are only 2 viewers, myself included, because I believe that as a journalist, if I don't bring up this story, then I then become part of the problem instead of becoming part of the solution. Opening this to Trisha Shetty. Trisha Shetty, it's Women Equality Day, unfortunately for us. And a lot of times we've noticed that the crimes against Dalit girls happens to send a message to the community, which means that these girls are not considered full entities who have consent and agency over their own bodies. They're considered property. So if I'm upset with you, I will scratch your car. It is an extension of that same feeling, Trisha.
Just at the offset, thank you for having this discussion. And I just want to state that whatever are we saying is from my experience of having worked in this field. I do want to highlight that if in my place there was a Dalit woman here, they would add a lot more substance and nuance. So I just want to make it very clear that perhaps whatever I'm saying is a very diluted version of the truth, as opposed to putting a spotlight. What you said, Faye, is exactly right. There are so many aspects of this. I look at it in a 3-dimension. One is the caste, right? India is forever plagued with this disease of caste. It's our first sin that we've never really, paid penance for. And if you just look at the data, the crimes against scheduled caste women, women who fall under the scheduled caste, crimes against them, the highest under even this is Dalit women. So even within the scheduled caste, the Dalit women end up suffering the most heinous crimes. Then, of course, it comes to economics, scavengery, the fact that, they don't have the access to the economic benefits and structures like upper caste people do. So when you are pitted against, a lower economy, automatically, this is unfortunately the way Indian legal structure works, the judicial structure works. You don't have the easiest access to the law. Human Rights Watch put out a report that said landlords and police personnel often use rape as a political lesson towards Dalit women. If you want a case to highlight this, there's a case that happened in 2014 where 2 teenage girls in Katra village, I believe, had the audacity, and I put this in quote unquote, to ask their upper caste employer for an increase in their salary of just 3 rupees. And because he was so offended that how dare they ask, they were gang raped and subject to the worst kind of brutality. An IAS officer by the name of Surya Singh highlighted 3 video clips where a police officer is asking a woman for sexual favors and threatened to implicate her in false cases if she refused. This is in Uttar Pradesh. In another case in Uttar Pradesh, a woman has reached a police station to file a complaint, and the miscreants abduct her within the police station and take her away. So not only are you seeing an increase in crimes against Dalit women across India, you then come to the second aspect of what is happening in Uttar Pradesh. We often, in joke, in parlance, call it the lawless state, Gunda Raj. But how does it translate to the lives of real women within these spaces? When we say Gunda Raj, what does that mean? It means that a 13-year-old child will be brutally raped. It just in August, you just look up to the viewers watching, just put rape, Uttar Pradesh, and August. Just see the amount of cases that will show up in your Google search. It's disgusting. It will make your blood boil. Cases of acid being thrown on a woman's face, cases of a woman being mutilated, cases of animals coming and feeding on the girl's body after she's been abused. It's not just rape. It is the most heinous way of mutilating a woman's body. And the message is very clear. It's telling a woman from Dalit community, how dare you aspire to seek education? How dare you aspire to go beyond the economic strata that society has forced upon you? And the final thing I'll come to in terms of leadership, right? Why is it so important to pin the tail of the donkey? Here, I believe the donkey is Mr. Ajay Bish, the chief minister. He cites that the opposition is the biggest threat to law and order when these cases are being raised. Now, you tell me, under whose portfolio does law and order, security fall? It falls under Mr. Ajay Bish's portfolio. This is the same man who did a whole wall of shame for anti-CA protesters. That may be his political ideology. I will not comment. SC had to interfere in this case. Where is the wall of shame for the people who are raping children within his community, within his state? There is the wall of shame for the police officers who are allowing girls to be abducted within police stations. There is the wall of shame for your police officers who are implicit in covering up crimes against women. And lastly, in the Unnao case, if you remember the rapist now, Kuldeep Singh went on record and said, "Nichle star ke log." He cited that the people the rapist.
That's right.
That the crime again he committed against the family were nichle star ke log. Where did Aditya Bish's voice go then? Why did he not put them in the wall of shame? So if anything, we need to be outraged, not just as women, as citizens of this country, that this is where they have left us. They want us to fight amongst ourselves because they don't want to address very real issues of our children's safety, of our women's safety, and want to continue with this caste-based hierarchy. And then if we raise it, they'll say, you are making it about caste. We are not making it about caste. No Dalit woman wants to be subject to this kind of atrocity. Till the time the violence doesn't stop against women based on their caste, we will make it about caste, you know? Sorry for the impassioned play.
No, Trisha, before I bring in the rest of the panel, I just want to ask you one more question. Obviously, there is the Dalit Atrocities Act here, other than the fact that this was heinous crime.
And POXO.
And POXO, yes. And the Dalit Atrocities Act and POXO are the two strongest, laws we have in our country. So again, it's not necessary to prove that the crime happened because the victim was Dalit, but the fact that the victim happened to be Dalit is enough in this case for it to come under the Dalit Atrocities Act. Isn't that true?
Of course. Firstly, when it comes to POXO specifically, the burden of proof is on the accused. The onus of proof of proving innocence is on the accused, not on the perpetrator. So that's one thing. The bereaved child's family does not have to prove that the incident happened. The accused has to prove it didn't happen. Secondly, it's obvious you take into account, any police, when they do investigation, they take into account where do you live, what is your family, what caste do you belong to, what school do you go to. It's a background. And when caste is such a significant background in our country, how do you not take it into account? When you have ministers who say nichle star ke log, when you have policies being passed, when Dr. Ambedkar realized it's such a significant issue plaguing our country, how do you not take it into account? Not taking it into account is doing a disservice. We should only have the audacity to not take it into account if we've reached a utopian state in our country where scavengery is not relegated as an occupation to one caste, where caste never comes up as a factor. And final thing I'll tell you when it comes to law. During the Unnao Kathua case, the death ordinance was passed, right? They changed the law and they passed the death ordinance for protection of children who've been raped under the age of 8. The ordinance says cases will be tried within 3 months. Now, I must say, cases under POXO are anyways mandated to be tried within 1 year. Right, there is a provision. I think it's section 13A. I forget the exact thing, but I'll look it up. Cases must be tried within 1 year. You go on ground, you realize cases are not tried within 1 year. So this is again hogwash. The easiest thing for the government to do is pass these ordinances. What we need is to strengthen the current judiciary we already have in place. We don't need new laws, new measures. Just implement them. The swift and assured justice. And again, this comes back to caste-based crimes. Why is there an impunity when people commit such crimes? Because it's not because the law doesn't exist, because they know they'll get away with it. Once we start striking down with efficiency, with speed, with assurity, that's when we know for a fact that law will work. We don't need new things.
Right, Mr. Pradhan?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate what Disha said and said it very passionately. And I think that is what needs to be understood by people who who are sitting in the portals of power, and it completely negates what my friend Mr. A.L. Banerjee was trying to impress. I don't know why, but he always believes in still holding a brief for the police, even though the police may be absolutely corrupt, and he never agrees with that. and police is inefficient only because of the corruption, which is the bottom line. Mr. Banerjee was trying to somehow put up an alibi for the police that because of he hinted that it is because of the delay in prosecutions, in the convictions, that the problem lies there. He will also quote that there's a shortage of policemen in terms of proportion to the. These are old alibis which have been given by successive police officers, but after retirement also he continues to hold that brief. I don't know why. Well, the fact of the matter is that first of all, the police mindset has to change. Unless, until they remain in this denial mode, and their focus is either on not registering the crime, which is a very common problem with Dalits in particular in Uttar Pradesh. If a Dalit victim goes to the police station, he's the last one to be heard. Let me tell you, irrespective of the fact whether the SP is a Dalit or not. It was only in Mayawati's period when there was some kind of fear of the government, and particularly with respect to the Dalits. So that is the time they did get some kind of security in the sense that they could register a crime. Otherwise, the general attitude of the police in UP is not to register crime, which is simply because the officers, and this is right from the highest level from the DGP to the Sepoy.
Well, let's just bring in Mr. Banerjee. Mr. Banerjee, do you want to respond to that?
Surely, I think Sharat Pradhan is entitled to his views. And whether I am holding the brief for the police department after retirement should also be open to scrutiny. However, he talked about Mayawati and registration of crime during the time of Mayawati as far as the scheduled castes are concerned. I would like to remind him, because he also lives in Lucknow, he has also seen that circular whereby Mayawati sent a circular to everybody, all the superintendent of police. It was a police circular saying that you will only register a crime under SC/ST Act, provided you have done a preliminary inquiry. And once
that was after 3 years.
Just a second, please let me proceed. Sharat, I did not.
Sorry, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I did not interrupt you.
Sorry.
You called me names. Fair enough. Now,
I did call
that let her. So she passed this order. She passed this ordinance. It went up for appeal in the High Court, and it was upheld there. It's literally the government of Mayawati upheld the thing in the courts. So to say that just because there was this lady who also happened to be a scheduled caste ensured protection to all the women of her caste is not quite correct. That is one. Secondly, there was this issue about lack of police or the judiciary not up to the mark. It is not that. We have discussed this earlier, and I would like to stress that the criminal judicial system, it's not only the prosecution, the criminal judicial system has to be reformed. Let us look at what Justice Malimat had to say. Nobody knows about it. It is probably lying unused somewhere, unread somewhere. When the criminal justice system is reformed, police reforms will also take place. Right now, whatever police reforms are taking place are cosmetic in nature. Until and unless I have continuously stressed this fact as far as women's crimes are concerned, as far as SC/ST Acts crimes are concerned, as far as POCSO Acts are concerned, there should be a separate court for women in every district of this country. Any crime related to that, any trial related to women should be tried by that court. And let it be swift, let it be certain. If you cannot have a swift and certain resolution, you will continue like the Jaipur case. If you remember, 35 years after the person was killed in Bharatpur or someplace, policemen were found guilty. 35 years. And the main accused was literally being dragged to the jail. He couldn't.
Is this the same as the fast track courts that the government committed to us after the Nirbhaya case?
You see, the fast track court, you see, the judiciary and the government both have got to come together to create these things. And just as this lady was saying that she has found that even POXO trials have not taken place in over a year, whereas they should have been done up within about 3 months. That is one issue. The third is, of course, the mindset as far as crime registration is concerned. Why is crime not registered? And this is not only in UP. This is all across India. This is called bulking and minimization. If something comes to you, you try to minimize that. And otherwise, you try to not write it. Why? Because the performance of the station officer, the performance of the superintendent of police, the performance of the DGP, everybody is judged by how many crimes have gone down. Until and unless you get rid of this mentality. And the only time I remember in Uttar Pradesh when each crime was literally registered was during Mr. N.C. Saxena's time. When he gave a free hand. He asked Charan Singh, who was the chief minister, I want to do this. Charan Singh said, go ahead. The crimes rose phenomenally. But that created a base for something else also. That is a different matter. So we have to think about it. And moreover, law and order happens to be a state subject. Invariably, the chief minister of all the states in India, other than probably Maharashtra, holds the law home portfolio too.
Okay. Yes, in Maharashtra, there is a different minister. Anil Deshmukh has the home portfolio, but you're right. In most cases, chief ministers prefer to hold the home portfolio as well. To our viewers, please use the super chat feature. It helps highlight the question or the comment that you're making. Otherwise, the question window moves too quickly. Mahesh Babu has made a statement. He says, every day, one or the other Dalit crime is being reported, but mainstream media completely ignores it. I believe he's referring to television. Because newspapers still find a corner in some column to mention crimes against Dalits. He said, either growing a mustache or riding a horse, there's some or the other crime that's coming up every day. Pratik Bhargava says, thank you to Trisha. Bharat Rawal says, a reality check is needed. Mohammed Saeed Shaurya has also made a statement. Bharat Rawal as well. Thank you all for supporting us. Please continue to support us. Dr. Dayal, I understand you wanted to come in on the point.
Because I do not want this conversation to go to just policing and police reforms. It is not about police reforms. It's like saying that during the COVID lockout, there are no road accidents because there is no traffic on the road. But even if there are 3 cars and if there's a drunken rich man's child in a BMW, let me tell you from Delhi, he's going to find some poor policeman to drive over because it's in his mind to be rash, to not observe the law. And that is the issue about caste. I spoke about impunity. It is not about how many SPs of the scheduled caste are in power at the moment, presiding over districts. I have, on your channel, pointed out the 85 Dalit members of parliament, but they're powerless. Together, collectively, they can't do a damned. The Muslims aren't enough either. But the point is they can make a bigger noise in a way, but still they get really, really suffer. The whole situation is, whether it's religious minorities or Dalits, they have the wedge, if you get what I mean, and they suffer because of that. May I again, something very disingenuous. The culprit is a Dalit, his accomplice is not a Dalit. Now, this is the sort of play. Suppose I say, how do you know? Suppose the culprit is the upper caste and the accomplice is a Dalit, pointing out that this is a vulnerable thing. The whole thing then goes on its head. And Trisha, I think, in her passionate statement, is pointing to that. Yeah. So it has got nothing to do with politics. It has to do with the national political will. How will we treat people who have been subjugated for millennia? How will we treat tribals? How will we treat people? You've just seen the Bombay court judgment on something very different, on the Tabligis. But that is the issue. Once you decide that somebody is lower than you, deserves not justice, but the stick, then you're going to find ways to do it. And fast-track courts are not going to help, because fast-track courts can only go if there is forensic evidence, if the public prosecutor has his or her heart in the job, if the judge has the mentality. And we've just seen Supreme Court. So let me not go into that road at all. But the whole nature of India,
Yes,
we have to change before justice for Dalits and tribals becomes a reality.
Right, and I, you know, on that point, I must ask the entire panel this question: the question of solutions. Now, Mr. Pradhan talked about policing. Mr. Dayal talked about the fact that the mindset of impunity, the mindset of the fact that if, as an upper caste person, if I commit a crime against a lower caste person, I will find a way to get away with it. Where is the solution then? Because the thing that upsets me the most is that every time we have a case of heinous crime, there are two filters that are applied, right? Filter number one that's applied, for those people who are still asking, Abhishek has said, our media house is sold out, why don't they raise real issues? I'll tell you why. The filter that's applied is this. Is it a middle class victim? Do you feel like it could happen to you tomorrow or to someone in your household? So for example, the last time we had really severe outrage was when the victim of the crime was from Hyderabad, was a girl who was working as a veterinarian, who was going to college, coming home on a two-wheeler in a city. We all felt that was really close to home because we all have family members who do that. That's when the outrage reaches its peak. But when we feel that this is happening in a village somewhere, to another community, it's not going to happen to my family members, then I don't feel like I should really worry about it. That's the first thing we need to check as citizens. The second thing is that whenever there is outrage also in those few cases, there's always this, we should do death sentence. And we should just chop everybody's heads off because there is a bloodlust that comes from society. And it never solves the real problems because the crime then continues. So I just want to ask the panel one by one, where that solution is. Is it in sensitizing the police? Is it in bringing in more members of the Dalit community into the police? Because Mr. Dayal said that's not really the solution. So I want to understand where that solution lies specifically. Is it in a better home minister? Where is it? So again, starting with Mr. Banerjee, since you've headed the police, Mr. Banerjee, do you believe it's in fast-track courts? It's in the delivery of justice? Because there's also a question of collecting the evidence, the chain of custody of the evidence, the actual prosecution inside of court and how well prosecution is paid or looked after. What should be done really to solve this problem?
There is nothing wrong with the fast-track courts. They should be made to function. They should be given the resources, some by the courts, high courts and the local courts, and some by the government themselves. And as far as prosecutions are concerned, the prosecution is not a police matter. It is a matter of the government. The government has to decide whether they want to prosecute it properly or not. Just for example, if the court sets, like the Supreme Court has set on a certain date, the Ayodhya matter has to be resolved. 30th of September, they've just recently said. Similarly, it can be supervised by the higher courts and said that resolution to this, judgment of this, trial of this should end by this particular date or this particular month. That can be done, and fast-track courts have produced the goods in many places. If you remember, the Unnao case was discussed here. The Unnao case was tried on a day-to-day basis in Delhi, and the judgment came certain and swift. Similarly, the fast-track courts could be also upped to that extent. As far as the sensitization of police is concerned, why only sensitize the police? Yes, the police does need sensitization, but more than that, the society needs to educate itself. We have just had a new education policy. Does it talk about all these things? Does it talk about doing away with all these things? At what stage are you going to tell a child, because the child is going to grow up and be this way? Thirdly, we are a rural and a feudal society. Despite the fact that 50% of our population is urban, we are basically extremely feudal right across the country. There is feudalism literally everywhere. Somewhere it is huge, somewhere it is not so bad. But this feudalism reflects in this kind of a caste atrocity wherever it is taking place. between the OBCs and the general caste, or the OBCs and the scheduled castes in Tamil Nadu for that matter. It is a quagmire, absolute quagmire. And well, this is all. This is
Mr.
what I
Pradhan?
think done.
Yeah. Well, while I agree with most of the issues pointed out by Mr. Banerjee, there's one thing which he has probably either slipped his mind, and which is extremely significant, is ridding the police of corruption. As I said, the bottom line, the whole problem is also because of corruption, and that overrides even caste factors in a state like Uttar Pradesh. And unfortunately, no effort is made in that direction, because it doesn't strike like people at the highest level who have worked at the highest level. It doesn't strike them that the problem lies because of a corrupt police, and where nothing matters other than money. You have seen not very long ago, last month only, there was a case in Amroha and another case in Meerut, where the police claimed to have worked out the cases. A girl was missing, 13-year-old girl was missing. The parents went to lodge a report, and eventually the father, mother, and the brother were locked up, prosecuted for having killed the daughter in some case of honor killing. After a year, the girl appeared, she was alive. The police had worked out a case of murder, and the girl came out alive. She was living with the guy with whom she had eloped, and she had a child also. Not one case, two such cases. And the police, in one case, the police had even been rewarded for having worked out the case. What has been done to those people? They deserve to be, unless there is some kind of deterrence. Why was this done? It is simple. Now, that is where the police at the higher levels need to understand how they work, because they don't, the whole objective is to remain in denial mode, not to accept that there's crime. Unless you accept that this is a problem, how can you find a solution? And
Yes.
the solution lies with the police more than anybody else. Police, more often than not, because of exchange of money, they work out weak cases, which allows the crooks to get away. The Sengar case was done primarily because of hammering by the media. Let me tell you. Otherwise,
Yes.
the fellow was roaming around on the streets of Lucknow, that MLA, the Unnao fellow. And the police would say, no, we can't find him. He was busy appearing on the social media, and the police was not able to find him. Why? Because of protection, because of patronage. So these things, and policing is the first thing, and then political the political mindset also has to improve. The determination,
Yes.
which is completely lacking.
Right, Trisha, Shetty, you touched these topics a little bit when you talked about, you talked about why women are made pawns in this sort of political messaging, where and we've seen it if we actually read through everything that has happened. Caravan, in fact, has put out a very interesting article on the rise of Dalit atrocities in Uttar Pradesh through the lockdown. And it talks about how beating women, abusing women, molesting women is part of this whole thing. Is it just policing? Is it prosecution? Is it collection of evidence? Is it politics? Where do you see the solution?
It would be doing a disservice to the situation if we pinned it down to one thing, right? So, Faye, I'm sorry to put you in the spot. Dr. John Dayal, I'm sorry to put you in the spot, but I'm sure y'all have heard the insult rice bag convert been thrown at y'all, right?
Twice a day, yes.
I apologize, but it's the same kind of disgusting insults thrown towards Dalit women very often, right? Rice bag, how many rice bags were you bought for? Another kind of insult is, come clean my toilets. You deserve to wash my poop. You lower the discourse to that level. So the one issue I think that's pretty much relatable, because most of us use social media, but as much as threats I get, my threats are never based on my caste. I've never been called a rice bag owner. I've never been asked to clean someone's poop. So it's inherent upon me to acknowledge that the violence meted out towards Dalit women, towards people from the scheduled caste, is more so based on their caste. Denying it makes me complicit in the cycle of violence, right? It makes me complicit. So that's inherent. Second thing, which I think should be the first point, is here we need voices.
Trisha, since you brought it up, I want to share a story with you. When I was the editor of a national news channel and sitting in the edit meeting, which I was leading, I pointed out that we don't have enough people of scheduled caste in the room in order to represent themselves editorially. And somebody in that room, and just to give you the dynamics, we were about 20, 22 people in the room, and more, almost 15 were Brahmins. And somebody turned around and told me, and I was the only Christian there, somebody said, but aren't all Christians Dalits anyway? Pointing out that effectively I should count as that one double diversity sort of higher. And, you know, I didn't know whether to correct this person's history, but in that moment, I just realized, and here I was the leader of this team, and it didn't stop that person from pointing it out. So it just goes to show how deeply embedded this is into our psyche.
So, and I will highlight that I think here, you know, when we talk about solutions, it's very important to have and center these solutions based on the voices of Dalit women, of Adivasi women, of tribal women, because they have faced it the most. And if you want to look at solutions, you need to go to the community that are the most affected. So that's one thing. Second thing, when we talk about, you know, the panelists before me, forgive me, I'm not the, Dr. Anand Banerjee cited the Unnao case as a case of, I think, a model case of justice working. I'm sorry, sir, the girl had to self-immolate herself. She had to set herself on fire to catch nation's attention.
That's
because
right.
Before
Absolutely.
that, her father had already been killed in judicial custody. So when you drive a person to the extent where the only solution is to set themselves on fire on the streets to ask for justice to what a body went through, this is not a just country. This is not a country that offers justice to the most disfranchised, right? And another thing, till the time Kuldeep and his fellow people were sentenced, there was a truck accident that happened where her mother and the lawyer and other people, there were multiple casualties to that crime. And again, I repeat, such heinousness. Rape is unfortunately not an unusual crime in India. Crimes against women is not. But the heinousness of it is unfortunately targeted towards the Dalit community, towards the lower caste community. This is not a new phenomena. I will take you back to the last example I cited in the interview of the breast tax that was imposed in Kerala, that was imposed on Shudra women, on Dalit women, because modesty was not afforded to them as a guaranteed right. If they wanted to cover their breast, they had to pay a breast tax. This is an age-old plague plaguing our country. And in terms of solutions, we need money. And what do we need money for? We need money in our judiciary. Do fast-track courts work? No. There is data that says over the years, fast-track courts have tried lesser cases than they have tried when they started in, I think, 2014. Also, fast-track courts that were set up to specifically try crimes against women, crimes against children, are trying all sorts of cases. Now, this is not the fault of the judiciary. We very easily say blame the judges. But when you're overburdened with cases, when you're not being paid overtime for working overtime, who do you think will show up and work? This is a system failure. You talk about where does the money come from? State decides, center decides. So we need to focus and ask and demand from our center, where is the money going? How much money from the Nirbhaya Fund have you invested in the fast track court? You talk about courts functioning. For courts to function in rape cases, it's normal procedure. Forensic lab has to provide the evidence as expert evidence in court. Forensic labs are severely under-resourced. Go to forensic labs, they have no money to run. You invest money in our forensic labs, you invest money in our courts. What access to justice do we have? It's easy to say justice. Who has access to the justice, right? You talk about public prosecutors that are appointed to rape survivors. They have briefs, such big briefs. They don't know the details of the case. It's very clerical. They come, they show up, they appear. These people and the perpetrators have access to the best criminal lawyers. So the system fails you. And to address in terms of solution, we need to ensure that money goes towards courts. Money goes towards forensic labs. You hire more police personnel. And I think lastly, I would say this cloud of impunity, right? This cloud of impunity where police personnel can get away by being complicit to the crime, where police personnel can get away by hiding up crimes, where politicians get away by hiding up crimes. That needs to be addressed. And this is where I think as a people, we have a lot of power and force. Let's make no mistake. The reason why Kuldeep Singh has faced just punishment, the reason why we got justice in Katua case, in Unnao case, in any case, it's because of public pressure. It's not because of the goodwill of our politicians, of the police personnel. This is we as a people, whoever is watching it, please know you have power. You dictate what happens on the streets. Focus. Put pressure on the chief minister. Ask Ajay Best, what are you doing? How can he blame the opposition? If he cannot follow law and order, then give law and order portfolio to opposition. Resign. we need to focus our attention on pinning the tail of the donkey, because trust me, these are crimes against all of us. Against all of us. So as people watching this, please know you have power. If the journalists are not listening to what you want to address, you talk about it on social media, you tag your chief minister. And these ministers, when EIA, environment, I'm going off track, but when students mobilized and demanded for environmental issues to be addressed against the environment minister, they took attention to it, paid attention to it, right? So we have power. We need to come together and let our chief ministers know that this is their duty and responsibility, and they are failing us. And when they are failing us, you name and shame them.
I just want to bring in, and I saved the last word for Mr. Dayal. Dr. Dayal, there is a lot of casual sort of casteism. It's very dangerous that happens in urban India as well. It sounds like this. Ye log to aise hote hain. These people are constantly like...
I understand Hindi.
Yes.
No, first of all, let me assure Trisha, if you really wanted to put me in the spot, you should have said John and Faye. Don't Christians practice caste? And I would have shrunk in shame, because we do practice caste. That brings me to solution number one, is the lack of fraternity in India. May I point out that the new education policy doesn't even have the courage to say that Dalits, religious minorities, have rights under the Constitution. I asked somebody once, very recently, what is your opinion of the NEP? And he's a Dalit journalist, and he was so annoyed. He says, what Dalits? The NEP doesn't even know that there are Dalits and tribals and religious minorities in India. So what are we going to teach the next generation? Because the solution is not for me. I'm an old man. It's my 51st year as a journalist. By the way, talking of that, may I point out my colleague Bhavanand Unyal analyzed press cards issued by central government. At that time in history, there was not a single Dalit journalist, but all the journalists were, if they were not Hindus, Shamas and Vermas, they were Johns. So, or Shias, and there was no Dalit journalist at all in the national capital region, according to the government. But this was the point. We are not teaching fraternity. We are not addressing communalism. We are not addressing casteism. We think abolishing untouchability has abolished all of this. We have not abolished this in the mind, even by law. The perpetual political effort exercise is to dilute the Atrocities Act. It is not designed to strengthen it. The act of putting in more policemen doesn't reflect in what powers are given to the Dalit officers. Even as a percentage, I repeatedly tell you, empowered people are not numerically necessarily in the majority. Empowered people are those who are given authority, who are treated as equals. At the IITs, you practice caste. In elite colleges, you practice caste. She's quite right. Why are you not reserving sewerage as something for Johns and Vyases and all the other things, Chatterjees, Banerjees, Mukherjees? Why not? Why is it that even the government of India in Kashmir has to come up with this sickening thing that because of the demolition of Article 370, now, etc., etc., etc. You are saying that the Dalits are worthy only of cleaning sewerage where they die, because like forensic science, you aren't even giving them correct cleansing science. You aren't giving them gloves and coverage, oxygen and all the tools that they require. My dear friend, I think the basic thing is we have to teach fraternity, an integral pillar of our Bill of Rights whatever little we have of it. And it is not practiced. If it is not practiced, and Trisha, again, I must compliment her, although she has sort of told us that we rise on our rice eating habits as South Indians, I suppose. No.
No, I meant it as an
I had appam for lunch. I had
not
appam for lunch, so it's on my mind. So what I'm trying to say is, laws will just be on paper, like gender laws. Unless patriarchy goes, unless casteism goes, it won't go that. Let us pray for that. I think at this moment, that seems to be the only answer. Police reforms will come. I was a reporter, young reporter, when Dharamveera was formulating the police report 50 years ago. Nothing has moved, I say.
Nothing has changed, unfortunately. I want to add one more word to the word fraternity that Dayal picked up. I also want to acknowledge that I'm a rice eater myself. I grew up in the South. If you give me rice and sambar or rice and the curds, I'll be happy for the rest of my life. So if someone's giving me a rice bag, I'm not going to say no. But I want to add another word.
All my Shetty friends eat rice.
The word dignity. The word dignity is included in the preamble of our constitution as being able to afford through fraternity dignity to every citizen of this country. Unfortunately, a lot of the things that we're doing right now denies dignity to human beings. Consider how education is happening this year. Online, via internet, on touchscreen devices. How many children in the country can afford internet connections, touchscreen devices? Consider the migrant labor exodus, as we called it in the media. Where was the dignity in what was done to those thousands and thousands of people who are now having to come back? They have two choices: either live in the village with no food and no work, or come back to the city and put up with the fact that many state governments are considering removing labor laws and reducing dignity of workers even further. Consider how members of different communities are given galis on social media, the dirty language that is used, very unbecoming of our society, that makes us look so bad. Where is the dignity in that? Consider how women journalists, women lawyers, women politicians, women in the public eye are treated by the media and treated by social media in the country. Where is the dignity in that? And as we examine how low we prioritize dignity in our society, we must realize that today we might look away thinking it's a Dalit woman in some faraway village. But when she loses her dignity, we lose ours. Because she is a citizen of this country and you are a citizen of this country. She is being targeted for XYZ reason and you could be targeted for a different reason tomorrow. Not standing up for the dignity and the rights of a Dalit woman in a remote village in Uttar Pradesh will eventually lead to us being targets and nobody standing up for us. And by us, I mean everyone, because if I sat down with a piece of paper, I could find a way to cut every single person in this country into some sort of minority or the other. Either you're a caste minority, or you're a gender minority, or you're a sexual orientation minority, you're a skin color minority, you're a language minority, you're a food minority. We can find different ways to make people victims. We have to stand up for each other, because unless we link arms with everyone, we will be further weakened. And by linking arms, we come to what John Dayal said. Linking arms is fraternity. Linking arms is standing together. Linking arms is seeing equality in each other. Seeing that there is no difference between Faye D'Souza and Trisha Shetty and the woman in the remote village in Uttar Pradesh. We're all the same. We're all guaranteed the same rights by the same constitution. So today, if she's lost hers, tomorrow we will lose ours. So it's very easy to get distracted by what the media is throwing at you right now on prime time, to distract you, because there's sex and there's drugs and there's rock and roll and there's Bollywood. But it has nothing to do with the fact that tomorrow you could lose your rights. We have to rise above it. And we have to realize that unless we stick together and demand better, Because this business of turning around and saying, what can I do? I'm one person is just not good enough anymore. Unless we stick together and demand better of our governments, city, state, and center, of any party, whatever color they wear and whatever their ideals are, they have to fundamentally give us 5 things. What are those 5 things? Clean air, clean water, free and quality healthcare, free and quality education, and safety. These 5 basic things is what we should expect from our governments. Even the richest man in this country doesn't have all 5, and the poorest has none of the above. It's up to us. Nobody else is going to stand up for us. Dignity through fraternity. Thanks for watching. Good night.